Edward, Ebenezer, Jeremiah Brown. I'm a football supporter of Ipswich Town. Wherever they play, you'll find me. I haven't missed a game since I was 3, with me scarf and me rattle and a big rosette, singing where was the goalie when the ball was in the net. Follow the town, up or down. I'm Edward, Ebenezer, Jeremiah Brown, but everybody call me Ted.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of We Follow the Town, a weekly Ipswich podcast looking into all things Ipswich. And today we will be joined by Benjamin Bloom, not Benjamin Blue, the Blue Mondays, Benjamin Bloom. So he'll be with us to talk about all things Ipswich as well as the new sponsorship. But before we get into today's show, I just want to quickly mention our sponsor. Bear with me. As you can see, I'm using a new platform today. I'm using a new studio. So if nothing goes right, then apologies for that. But we are sponsored by Julian Hughes. He is a golf coach. He coaches at Old Joe's Golf in Great Conrad. You can contact Julian at juleshughes1965@gmail.com, or you can phone him at 07382 834 199. I'll repeat that again, 07382 834 199. I always mess that up. But as I said, we are joined here today by Benjamin Bloom. First of all, Benjamin, how are you doing? And how have you, or what do you think about Ipswich's season this year?
I am lovely, and I think Ipswich's season this year has been thoroughly underwhelming. Hopefully you can see me and hear me loudly and clearly. I think we just dropped out there for a minute before, but all good this end, Ben.
So, okay, there isn't really much to talk about in regards to what's going on at the moment in the world of Ipswich. There is news. We'll get to the news later on. But should we be a little more optimistic coming into next season? Because we are going to release players, hopefully, bring better players in. So are better days yet to come at Ipswich Town?
You'd hope so. You'd hope it bottomed out. But we thought maybe it bottomed out last season and everything was going to come back this one. And that hasn't happened, and the cynical part of being an Ipswich fan says, even when you think something's going to get better, find a way for it not to. However, like you mentioned, things do seem to be changing for the better with the ownership, and we'll see what happens with the squad. I see Stephen Ward has been released today, hasn't he? So I think it might be a drip, 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 or I think when it gets to perhaps Monday next week, we might see a large cull, perhaps, of out-of-contract players. But you still got to do the job the other end, haven't you? Still got to invest the money, build the squad. And like I've said 1,000 times in League One, you have to be competent. And if you're not competent, go figure, you finish in 11th or lower, even if you're a big club by League One standards like Ipswich are.
So, okay, the transfer market, or this summer's transfer market, would you actually bring in players, or would you maybe look at bringing some of the youngsters up from our youth system? Because, of course, our under-18s are in the Cup semi-finals. We do have a good under-23 squad. So could we maybe look at using our youngsters as opposed to, like spending a lot of money in the transfer market? Because we've been linked to Waghorn, haven't we, Jordan Rhodes? They will take up a lot of the wage bill.
They will. I think you have to do both, don't you? I think you don't want to be relying on the youngsters to be carrying the team. The best case scenario for youngsters is there's a winning team and they can be dripped into it. Look, if you get a player who's just there and can already do it, then they go in the team. But obviously hasn't been a very good situation for youngsters, probably for 4 or 5 years. I had high hopes for Josh Emmanuel, and then Miles Kenlock, Flynn Downs, Andre Dezelle. Ted Bishop obviously has had his injury problems. But it's been a hard situation, I think, for those youngsters to get through. And I hate to say it, but because it's not going to be like this if we do get into the Championship. Use the financial muscle whilst it's there, and hopefully you can drip youngsters in.
Exactly, and like speaking about the likes of Miles Kenlock, he's been playing well this season. He hasn't really done much wrong. Is he a player that you think is worth keeping around, even if he is just on the bench?
I don't want to say no, because I like the guy. I like the player. However, there's been lots of false dawns and lots of chances for Kenlock under various different managers, and they've consistently taken him out of the team and put other players ahead of him. Dare I say, if there was a League One or Championship ready left back there, we'd know, and we wouldn't be bringing in Stephen Ward, age 35 or whatever he was at the start of the season. So as much as I'm always big fly the flag for the youngsters to come in, there's a time where you say, look, the proof's in the pudding, and why have managers continually overlooked him? I guess that's not to say that it won't work at another club, but without doing something I never want to do, which is piling on an Ipswich Town player, possibly I'd be looking at somebody else, I think.
So let's get into the news. We'll talk more about the season later on, but there is, of course, quite a lot of stuff happening in the world of Ipswich Town. Ed Sheeran, you're probably wondering why I'm bringing his name up on an Ipswich podcast. Well, he is our new shirt sponsor. So Ed Sheeran has revealed to be Ipswich Town's new shirt sponsor. Sheeran, a regular visitor at Portman Road in recent seasons until the pandemic hit, will sponsor both the senior Town men's team and the women's team for an undisclosed figure. So let's talk about this, because from a PR perspective and a financial perspective, this could actually be quite good for Ipswich Town, couldn't it?
You'd hope so. Yeah, I mean, just contrast it back to Magical Vegas being announced and moral outrage everywhere on the internet, which is what the internet's for, I think, isn't it? And everyone being unhappy with this garish looking sort of casino, and it was vastly unpopular. So look, I think this is great. I really do. Look, let's be honest, most football fans are not business people. So really, with my cynical hat on, whichever sponsor pays the most money is the best sponsor for the club. I know that kind of is a bit straightforward, but isn't it great to have, I mean, Ed is a worldwide brand, a worldwide star. The thing's gone viral today and around the world, hasn't it? So I think it's great. Hopefully, he's kind of too big for the stadium now, isn't he? Played at Chantry Park twice, but if they could put a gig into the bargain where, look, I'm sure for the likes of Ed Sheeran, it's a nice tax break as well to go and sponsor a football club, and maybe there's things they can do to scratch his back down the other side. And I think it's great. I'm really pleased with that announcement. So many fans of clubs are, unhappy about sponsors and betting companies and casinos and, loan companies and all of that stuff. And local lad, worldwide star, bring it on, I say.
So he's also sponsoring the women's team, which is actually great because, it helps bring more eyes and more attention onto the women's team. Could that maybe be, and we talked about the PR side of things, could it maybe be great PR for the women's team as well?
It's difficult, isn't it? The whole... It feels unfair to compare the profile of the women's team to the men's team, given how many years and years ahead of building up the profile the men's team has had over the women's team. You'd almost imagine that the men's team being sponsored by Ed Sheeran would completely steal the thunder from the women's team anyway. I think for women's football particularly, it's going to be a slow burn to build up that popularity and that brand trust. Although I dare say they don't have the stench of what a lot of the men's game has over it. And if they can learn the lessons, especially after these last few weeks of the the men's game being absolutely dragged through the mud, then that's no bad thing. But yeah, I'd love to see the deal. I probably never will, as to how things get split. But what we do know with FFP is that spending money down the female side of the game is actually classed as good FFP money. So again, talking about breaks, if you're going to pay it in tax anyway, funnel it through into the women's game, and hopefully that can grow.
So, okay, here is a question on Twitter from Phil Marshall. Both of your favourite Ed Sheeran songs. Now, don't judge me, but I don't think I can name a single Ed Sheeran song.
Oh, God, I bet I can name about 10, I reckon.
Really?
I think I'm quite good on this. Look, I'm a musician by trade, and there are certain songs that get into the loop as first dances. So you must know Thinking Out Loud by Ed Sheeran. You must do.
Shape of You, is that an Ed Sheeran song?
Shape of You is the biggest hit in the world in 2017 or something. Yeah,
song, then.
There you go. No, he's had some amazing hits and some amazing success. And yeah, I have moaned a few times when I've had to repeatedly play thinking of Baby Now, take me to your loving. I'm maybe getting the title wrong, but I've had to play that song a million times for first dances at weddings in my time. So that would be the one closest to my wallet, I think.
And they're crowd favourites, aren't they? Everybody loves Ed Sheeran.
Well, looking down the Twitter feed, some people don't, but I think we should be very proud of a local guy done good.
Exactly. And before we get on to anything else, we're just going to wrap up the news and let's talk about a few transfer rumours. Every year we, of course, get transfer rumours. Some of them can be believed, some of them can't. And, well, recently we've been linked to Martin Waghorn. Martin Waghorn, of course, used to play for us. He was a great player for us. He subsequently went to Derby, played under Frank Lampard and played under other managers there, including Wayne Rooney. But he's a free agent at the end of the season, and he's been linked to us by Football League. Well, first of all, Ben, can we take these rumours seriously, or should we maybe just take them with a pinch of salt?
There's going to be a lot of agents, knowing that Ipswich have now got this new investment, let's just say, pushing their players and pushing their narrative into the press. Obviously, the Waghorn one makes sense straight away as a link because he used to play for us. But there's going to be a lot of players linked, I think, which is great for us as fans to hear the stories. I'll let your listeners and your watchers be the judge of which rumours they're going to take seriously and which rumours they're not. But our friend Phil at TWTD has reported this one, and he very much has his ear to the ground. So perhaps that might be a sign that it's a serious rumour. But again, is it agents putting it out there? And I think Mr. Waghorn's got more important things to worry about on Saturday, trying to keep Derby in the Championship in their big head-to-head game against Sheffield Wednesday.
So let's talk about the type of players we've been linked to, because we usually get linked to older players who have got quality but can ultimately do a job at League One level. And that kind of begs the question, should we maybe be concentrating on signing older players, or is it maybe worth investing into youth? And by youth, I mean younger players from maybe Scotland, England, lower down the leagues. So what's better, older or younger?
Doesn't so much matter as long as they're proven and they can do the job. You're in a bit of a funny place in League One. It's a very different pool that you're fishing in than when you're in the Championship. You can get Premier League loan players come down. You can get players who aren't in Premier League teams that, you know, can work their way down and want out and to be given a chance in the Championship. And obviously there's a bit more of a swell of cash in the Championship, and it's almost like it goes down in the Championship and then drops completely off a cliff in League One. So you don't, for example, see actually too many fees paid for anybody. So it's, I suppose it's a little bit of a case of what can you get, who's available. We know this summer, because of COVID and the way contracts have been structured, that there's going to be a lot of out of contract players. So I think that might be the some clever recruitment through them. Like you say, some promoting of our own youth players. I suspect we might see a few fees paid, and then the question is, do you go to the Championship and try and pull someone down to a level below they're playing at the moment? Do you try and take the best players who are already in League One, try and prize them away from their clubs if, you know, maybe money's a bit tight there? Do you go down into League Two? There's a lot of pools to fish in. I think as well, Paul Cook has obviously, through Chesterfield and Pompey and Wigan, obviously going to have a lot of contacts as well. And we saw Mick do this a lot, going back to players that he knew and he'd worked with before. So I suspect there's going to be a lot of pools to fish in, to use that tired metaphor once again. And it's going to be a mix of all of them. And if they can do the job, I don't care whether they're 17 or 37. Get them in, get them on the pitch.
So let's get into the show. And thank you to everybody who's joined in. Hello to Joe, Dick and Taylor Paul in the comments. Feel free to get involved. Feel free to put your thoughts down into the comments. But I want to start off with, Ben, on what you do, because you of course have a YouTube channel. You do match reviews. You look at the world of the EFL Championship and Ipswich Town. First of all, a rather cliched question that's probably come up quite a lot, but how has your YouTube channel been affected by the pandemic in regards to, you know, going to games and doing all of that stuff?
Yeah, it's been massively affected, but I think I mean, you would know because you're doing the same thing. We've all had to kind of adjust and just roll with it. So my core channel started on go to a game, scribble down a load of notes, run back to my car, stick the camera up in near the rearview mirror and talk about the game. And the audience for that obviously was people who literally had just been to the same game, and they come away and they're processing the game. And you know, if you've lost, they you know might want to let out some anger somewhere, and maybe vicariously can do that through you. And if you've won, they kind of want to relive. And in the main, I think it's like a shared experience. You go to the game and then go to the pub afterwards, and you talk through the game that you've just watched. So that was the bedrock of the channel. And then, of course, you can't get into stadiums. And I was lucky enough in the start of this season. So I think we're still locked down at this point. I went to a couple of behind closed doors games, and I thought, this is going to be great, Ben. This is going to be awesome. I'm the only one in here. I'm going to get thousands of views on these videos because no one else is in there. And I put the videos up, and I didn't. And because people didn't have that shared experience. They didn't want to hear me talking about a game that they didn't get to go to. So we've had to flit around. So much of my life is spent in this lovely office now, watching games on this TV and getting the shared experience with other people who are watching at the same time. So it's changed massively. And of course, as sort of creators, I know that jars with people who aren't necessarily in that space. We've got to figure out what to do next. You know, how many games do we get to? Are we still going to be sat here on a Saturday on iFollow, or in the, you know, what's the mixture? So it's changed. It's changed big style, and we're going to have to figure out what to do in the future. I still do previews and reviews and things of that nature, so they're solid. They don't change. But yeah, it's changed, and it will change again. And who knows what the best thing to do is going to be? We'll find out.
So, do you think the pandemic has changed the way we watch football? I don't mean in the way like, oh, watching my follow or watching it on TV. I mean, like, watching it from the outside. You reckon it's actually changed the way we see it? Because everything has changed out there, from the match day experience to the way we interact with our football clubs. So, yeah, going back to what I just said, do you reckon the world of football has kind of changed as well as the way we view it?
I think for the people that had season tickets and went to away games and, staunch fans, I think they go straight back and they're going to be at all the games again and nothing's going to change for those guys. Obviously, the big elephant in the room is the fact that we spent a year without fans in the ground. And let's be honest, because of the TV revenue, it didn't matter a hoot to the Premier League or the Champions League, which obviously has emboldened these figures at the top to think, well, why am I particularly bothered about 20,000 people paying 30 quid when I can have an audience of millions across the world on TV and I don't much care about the fans in the ground? So there's that tension as well. I'm not sure what will happen with iFollow or the 3 p.m. blackout. It does feel to me like the 3 p.m. blackout is a bit of an old kind of antiquated rule, but look, whatever gets decided and however people watch, we know more people are going to be watching the big clubs in the Premier League. They're going to make more money, whether that's through the turnstiles or through TV or iFollow equivalent or Club TV or what have you. So I think the government's getting involved now, and there's going to be the review that's been done. So we will see. I know a lot of people, though, who, I mean, like I live in Bedfordshire. It's an hour and a half up to Ipswich for me. So every now and then, I might quite like to watch a game at 3 p.m. live, with a 3-hour round trip. And I dare say for fans, I don't know, you get Sunderland away on a Tuesday night, you might want to put down the 10 quid for the iFollow. So it'll be interesting to see, but we just know that the bigger clubs will still be the bigger clubs and they'll still have the bigger slice of the cake.
So TBH Harlem, can't wait to get back into Portman Road. Not a fan of watching football on TV, especially without crowds. So, okay, we're back at Portman Road next season. Do you reckon that initially that there'll be a bump in the amount of people actually attending the games? Because, of course, we have the new ownership. We have lots of things to look forward to. Surely we can look forward to a packed Portman Road.
Yeah, it only depends on whether there's any restrictions on what the attendance can actually be. But traditionally, you get a bump in August anyway, don't you? It's summer, it's the new season, the team can't be bad yet because no games have been played. Like you correctly mentioned, the new ownership should be some excitement around that. In theory, there's going to be some new players. The fans haven't been in since Paul Cook's been the new manager. So every one of those factors would intimate a little attendance bump. But you know as well as I do that points on the board, wins, goals, that's what keeps the people coming back. And you can get that artificial bump, but it won't sustain unless the results are good on the pitch. And I have to credit Ipswich fans because they were still pushing 20,000 at times in League One in Lambert in the first season down before the lockdown. Obviously, it dwindled because the standard of football was so poor. But yeah, I think you're totally right. I think that there'll be an obvious bump, providing there's no restrictions on how open the ground can be.
So let's take a brief look at the season as a whole, because this has been a very eventful season. It's actually felt like a very long season with Paul Lambert starting out as the manager. Didn't do well. We all know how that ended. And then Paul Cook coming in. So do you reckon that, okay, at the start of the season, did we have the right team to maybe get promoted this year? Because we're right outside the playoffs. Unfortunately, a couple of losses have meant we can no longer make it to the playoffs. So have we kind of let ourselves down, per se?
It doesn't matter if you have the right team if you don't have the right manager, does it? And I think everything we've read and heard and kind of witnessed is that we didn't seem to have the right manager. Obviously, I think in sort of Ipswich circles, we passed the blame and the anger around between the owner, the manager, the players. Sometimes we turn on each other and blame the fans as well. And it tends to go through little phases of that. And obviously after Lambert went, then the blame seems to have gone to the players now. So some people would argue, to your first point, that we never had the team to go up and these players are not as good as we think they are. But I'm not so sure about that. I think we'd all admit they were pretty poorly coached. And if, we'd see examples of, I'm not going to have a pop at Fleetwood here, but I'd see Fleetwood come down with much less budget. Probably had a few decent paid players, but not what we've got. And they changed system, they changed shape, moved the ball around nicely and won at Portman Road. And you're sitting there thinking, why are Fleetwood capable of doing this and we're not? Either our players aren't as good as we think they are, or the manager can't get the best out of the players. So the sad thing, Ben, is that we'll never know because all these players are going to be cleared out, aren't there? A lot of them, a number of them, going to be cleared out this summer. So I think other managers would have finished in the top 6 with this team, and Lambert was very poor. We've seen the football, and I don't know what's happened in terms of the players. And since Cook's come in, there seems to have been some psychological collapse, hasn't there, since then? And whatever anxiety about contracts being up and Cook kind of brutally calling them out after the games has not produced results. So no, it's been just a huge letdown again after a good start again like last year.
So you mentioned Paul Cook brutally calling out the players. Paul Hurst did a very similar thing when he first came in. He called out the underperforming players. But let's just stick to Cook a minute, because was Cook right to call out the players? I know they hadn't been performing. I know the club had been in the slump for quite a while, but surely that isn't great man management.
Proof's in the pudding, isn't it? The proof's absolutely in the pudding. And if he gets a reaction out of calling out the players, then it was good man management. Obviously, it didn't work with Paul Hurst doing it, but dare I say, Paul Cook's a lot more experienced, has had a lot more successful moments on his CV. I know Paul Cook had some, but I think they're very different situations the two of them find themselves in, albeit with a couple of the same players, though, that Paul Hurst and Paul Cook have kind of both called out. So maybe that says more about those players than those two managers. But the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? What it does do, though, is it does actually put pressure on Cook now. Because if he turns around and says, these players are rubbish, I can't work with them, and I want my players, and then he gets his players and he doesn't win, then people will say, well, it didn't work with your players, didn't work without your players. So what's the common denominator there? Proof's in the pudding. But if what he's suggesting, the standards he's setting, he can back up, then it'll actually turn out to be good man management. But again, proof's in the pudding. Audio's gone down, Ben. I don't know if you can hear me. Shall I just keep talking while you figure out the audio? No, we've still lost you, my friend. This podcast is sponsored by Julian Hughes, golf coach. I can see in the top there. Is your audio back, Ben? Nothing there, my friend. Oh, there you are.
Yes, you can hear me. Apologies about that. That's the wonderful thing about doing things live, is that there's always going to be some technical difficulties, and it will always give me something to do in the edit. But as I was saying, I don't know whether any of you could hear me, but I was so get involved in the comments. Apologies for dropping out just then. My camera died, so that's probably why. But okay, what I was going to ask is, do you reckon that we should maybe look at Paul Cook, the long-term manager? Because if he is so critical about the quality of the club and the deep-rooted problem that the club has, surely this is a long-term project for him.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So if he's right, and a lot of us think he is right, that there's deep-rooted stuff, then he needs to hang around. I can't recall. Did he sign 2 years or 3 years? I can't recall.
He signed 3 years.
Yeah, so you would ultimately like him to see that out, and at the end of that contract, at least be in the Championship, and hopefully in the Championship in the second season in the Championship as well, because we all hope for promotion next season. But hey, we've seen bigger clubs than Ipswich get marooned in that division for longer than the 2 seasons we've been in, for sure.
So, okay, this may be a rather cliched question, even a rather silly question, but do you reckon that promotion to the Championship, and maybe even success in the Championship, is an immediate must for Paul Cook? Because, he's spoken up the club. We, of course, have the new ownership that has, of course, piled on the pressure. So surely he has to get us promoted to the Championship and give us success in the Championship.
Well, that's the pressure he's put on himself. He's, I'm sure we wouldn't have to dig far to find quotes of him promising promotion and saying that's what the club deserves, what the fans deserve. He knows what he's doing. He's been promoted with Chesterfield and Pompey and Wigan. He knows his way around a promotion, but obviously Ipswich fans will sit here and say Roy Keane had a promotion at Sunderland, Paul Jewell had promotions at Bradford and Wigan, Mick McCarthy had promotions at Wolves and Sunderland, Paul Hurst had a promotion at Grimsby, Paul Lambert had 2 promotions at Norwich. So we've had plenty of managers with promotions on the CV. Where I would push back a little bit is the Championship is hard. Unless this review of wealth distribution occurs before we get back, it's a tough old job to compete with the teams coming down from the Premier League in the Championship. So whilst I would be confident that he should be able to have a good go at making us competitive in League One, I think look, you can have as much money in the bank as you like. Your owners can have as much money as they want in the Championship, but there's an FFP limit, and there's 3 teams coming in getting 45 million quid parachute payments every year from the Premier League. So you can have 50 billion in the bank. You can only lose 13 million a year in the Championship, and you're against teams that are receiving 3 times that in broadcast income. So it's a very screwed up system at the moment, which I've moaned and whined about for years on end, and I'm repeating myself. But yeah, don't take for granted an immediate, quick ascent through both.
Could the new owners maybe be put off by FFP in the Championship, though? Because, financially, it is a tough league to get out of, especially with, parachute payments. So could that maybe something that could maybe put them off the Championship, maybe?
Oh, God, I'd be massively put off by it, but they've bought the club. So, look, no one makes a profit in the Championship. And we said this at the time when the takeover was being mooted. If they're here to make money, they've got to get to the Premier League, which is kind of good if you're an Ipswich fan, or well, depends whether your glass is half full or half empty, doesn't it? Because if they're very, very determined to do that, then it's Premier League, or they're gonna lose money, and you just hope there's no naivety about how hard it's going to be. But far be it for me to look upon these people, especially when they've brought in Eyriey in the sort of chairman position, and Mark Ashton, and we've seen Andy Rawls come in as the what job title did they give him? I can't remember, performance director or something of that nature. These are all people that are, quote, sound like Graham Souness, football people. So they've put people in there. Yes, it's scary in the Championship, but look, we all know you can lose money for 5-10 years in the Championship. And Mick Mills used to say this on the radio. All it takes is one promotion can wipe those debts completely clear, because you go from 7 million broadcast to 100 million broadcast the second you get promoted. So that's the beauty and the beast of English football, isn't it? That ridiculous cliff edge and the difference between the haves and the have-nots.
So, okay, final question before we wrap up the show. And if any of you in the comments have any quick questions which we can ask before we go off the air, then please put them in the comments. Okay, so let's talk about the staff at Ipswich Town, because Paul Cook has been very precise with who he's brought in. He was obviously hoping to get Liam Richardson in, so he hasn't really got a proper number 2 laid down. What type of person do you think he's going to go for? And do you reckon Noel Hunt, a random name to bring out there, I know, but do you reckon that he could maybe be Paul Cook's new assistant manager?
I don't know. You would have thought, like you said, the plan would be Liam Richardson, but fair dues to Liam Richardson, because Wigan have been brilliant for the last 8-10 games. So good luck to him. I think in life sometimes when the door opens, and yeah, you could go back as the number 2 to Paul Cook, but Liam Richardson might now have a 15-20 year managerial career. You don't know. So he's got to back himself, and good luck to him. So yeah, there's an open position there. Lots of people got very excited seeing Kieran Dyer out in front of the media, and that's a sort of emotionally led one for a lot of Ipswich fans, because we were all big fans of him as a player. Sometimes that doesn't add up. Sometimes it does. I wouldn't write him off or say, be pushing too much, because I don't really know of his qualities in terms of as a number 2. But Paul Cook seems to like him. So, or someone could be brought in, and we've seen clubs plenty of times will bring in a number 2 that's actually been a manager before and work with them. And I know we're talking big names here, but Alex Ferguson, everyone used to say the number 2, if it was Brian Kidd or Carlos Queiroz or Steve McLaren or whoever he had in that position, was a really, really important role. And I dare say I think Paul Cook might be a bit more micromanaging things, but yeah, there's an open role and a really good job for somebody there, because Cook has been successful and the club look like they're in a good spot to progress forward. So I wouldn't think they'd be short of candidates, but yeah, you're right. Maybe it'll be Noel Hunt or Kieran Dyer, somebody who's already around the club, just going to step up and do that role. But maybe you're going to want someone a bit more experienced.
And finally, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because Luke Chambers, of course, is he out of contract at the end of the season? I think he is. Yeah. He's out of contract at the end of the season, and he's, of course, been linked with Colchester United. Should he retire in the near future, would you maybe have him as a future Ipswich assistant manager?
You can bring up that chat as well, John McGreal. That kind of feels all the things that we've just said. Someone who's been a number 1, someone who's known to the club, got a bit of experience. So
a good shout as well.
I've heard this link as well with John McGreal. So yeah, you can probably take that one reasonably sort of seriously. Luke Chambers, I don't know. It just depends the way Cook wants to play this. If he wants to play, look, this is my club. This is not Mick McCarthy's club anymore, or Paul Hurst's, or I don't know if it ever was, or Paul Lambert's. I want to do this with my guys, and Chambers is a very respected sort of guy around that squad. But look, sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and maybe Cook wants to go down his own route. I generally feel when you've got somebody at the club who's been there a long, long time and knows the ins and the outs of everything, you kind of try and find a role for them, providing they're a sort of positive influence. So I don't know what could be offered to Luke Chambers, but he lives in the area, doesn't he? He's done hundreds of appearances. We've heard about him putting up youth team players. Okay, he's not Kevin Beattie, we know, but he's at the club at a low ebb, and we'll see. It might be though that Paul Cook is just, no, I want a clean slate. I want the previous era gone, and I want everything new. And unfortunately, people like Luke Chambers and Cole Skews will maybe fall victim to that. But they're useful guys. They're viable employees for other clubs, even if they want. I mean, Chambers is fit as a fiddle, isn't he? So he could go and play, maybe not at League One level, but he could go and play another season or two for somebody else if he so wants to. But I'm sure Colchester will get linked, won't it? So, we'll see.
And of course, thank you very much for appearing on the show. I really appreciate it. Finally, where can people find you on social media, and where can people find your YouTube channel?
I will be irritating football watchers on YouTube on an almost daily basis, Ben. So obviously, if you're an Ipswich fan, I am a founder and a host on the Blue Monday podcast, which just type Blue Monday podcast into Twitter or YouTube and you'll find us over there. Going to be going into our 7th season next season, which feels like a life sentence times about 5, doesn't it? And my personal YouTube channel is the Benjamin Bloom Football Channel, which does concentrate mainly on the Championship. So if Ipswich can get themselves back up, I've got the best of all worlds because everything kind of collides there. Hopefully, next season, I've got something in the works to do some League One coverage as well. But obviously, myself and the boys on the Blue Monday team that we've got do such a great job doing the Ipswich stuff that often I don't really feel I need to on my channel. Why would I when they're doing it so well? So yeah, Twitter at Benjamin Bloom, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. If you really, really are a lovely person, patreon.com/Benjamin Bloom and support me. Although you should probably be supporting nice young people like Ben who are trying to find their way, much younger than me. So maybe do that instead. But obviously I'll take any of the support I can get. But thank you for having me on. And do hit me up on Twitter and get involved. Actually, it's going to be playoff season soon, Ben. Next Monday. So just like wall-to-wall playoff coverage if you're bored after Ipswich finishes the season.
And there's a perfect way to round up the show. And of course, you can find us at We Follow the Town on Twitter, or me at Ben Eyriey. Don't bother trying to spell my last name; it's quite difficult to spell.
What's the lineage of that name, Ben? Is it like French or something?
Yeah, it's French. I come from a French family, so
This explains your
Ben Smith, or
this explains your nice, fun Gallic appearance. It's great. Yeah. I'm just a boring. I think I've got some kind of Celtic lineage, some Scottish or Irish in me, but no, it's not as fun or flamboyant as being part French. So I'm very jealous.
I still wish I was called Ben Smith or something easier to pronounce.
No, you don't. I'm going to sound like a right snob, but my favourite holiday is south of France. Sit in the sun, eat some lovely food, and drink some lovely wine. That sounds good to me. So. Up the France.
Agreed, and that's where my family's from. So lovely part of the world.
Beautiful.
But anyway, thank you for joining me on the show. And as always, keep following the town.